you're happy to do anything because you're trying to make a dollar, but you just get firmer on your process and you say, no, like going to see a surgeon going, mate, no, why don't you do it? Can we do it this way? And the surgeon goes, no, you don't want to do it my way. You go and see someone else. And so you just got to hold your line.
What is success to you?
I think it was a learn to love it experience.
And there's always pitfalls that you can fall in, but then you've got no one else to blame but yourself.
Number one thing if you're struggling is to catch other people about it.
Guys, before we start this episode, let me just quickly jump in here just to thank our content partners, Abodo, for supporting Better Builder. We love what these guys stand for, especially around their sustainability and biodiversity. Abodo is actually thinking way beyond just sustainability, and we know that that is important to more and more clients that builders work with. And all from a family-owned company as well. So thanks, Abodo. We love what you guys do. Now let's kick into this episode. Stephen Humphry, thanks for coming on the podcast.
No worries. Great to be here.
So it's not Stefan.
No, not Stefan. Definitely not. No.
As your Uber drivers like to call you Stefan.
They
it's
do.
PH.
Yeah, a couple of times a week. I get that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good. But thank you so much. Joe that was on the podcast recently, he said I had to have you on.
Yep.
I don't know, if he did me a favor here or not. We'll find out. But it was great having him on, and obviously you can recommend it, so I had to get you on, so I appreciate it.
Joe was actually, I've been working for myself now for, I think it's 19 years this year, 20 years next year, and Joe was actually my last boss. So.
Oh, really?
That I had, yeah.
Crazy. Yeah. Okay, that's cool.
Yeah,
he's a great guy, so.
Yeah, and so we sort of both went and did our own thing, and we've essentially got very similar businesses, so yeah.
Very cool. Well, I want to sort of rewind a little bit and get a little bit of an idea of sort of how you grew up and where you grew up. So were you a Sydney boy?
Yeah, Sydney boy, south. So, Caringbah, Cronulla area.
Cool.
Yep. Typical, good child, back in the good old days, I reckon, riding the pushies around, and we had a big bush reserve next to where we grew up. So I was always out there mucking around in bush and on the water and boats and all that good stuff.
Oh, nice. And what was your who were you in high school? Or how would your friends describe you in high school?
That's a good question, actually. So I went to an all-boys school, and, not super academic, but I'd say, street smart is, and I ended up being really good at rowing. So that sort of defined me at school, I'd say. So I rowed for like the 8 at school for 3 years. And so that was sort of, that probably is what they talk about the most. So,
yeah, people that do rowing is like an interesting breed, eh? Like rowing is sort of, you have to sort of love pain a little bit, eh? Just to do rowing.
Yeah, I think I sort of progressed quickly at school, and I don't know, I just, you're right. You just seem to be, if you can hang on, and push through that pain barrier, it's more, it's half mental and half, there's definitely the physicality, but the mental side of it is hard. So if you can hang on, I mean, you guys, Kiwis, you got actually some really good rowers. But it's definitely a mental, just some mental pain.
Yeah. I went to an all boys school there, Auckland Grammar, and that we always had a good rowing team. And I just remember at the gym, I'll be with the rugby boys, whatever, in the gym, and you just see the rowing guys pushing themselves and then rolling off the machine.
Yeah. There's like the lactic and the pain and if you really do a proper, like when we used to get tested on the erg, you'd fall off and, you'd basically be throwing up.
Yeah, I remember seeing that, and we'd always be standing there being like, okay, these guys are a bit weird, but you really know how to push yourself, so that's cool.
Yeah.
So you finished school, and then what? How did you sort of navigate sort of into the construction game? Like, what was that about?
My father's an electrician, my grandfather's an engineer, and I grew up, even when I had to study when I was, like towards the end of high school, Dad would be working on something, and I'd do 2 hours of study and then 4 hours helping him. So I was always wanted to be, I knew what I wanted to do, so I got the marks just to do construction management at UTS, Sydney Uni, or Sydney University, but got the marks, did that 4 years, and actually got my cadetship at Multiplex straight off. I think I had that before I went on schoolies, so started that, and then literally did uni part-time for 3.5, 4 years. And then the last year I just wanted to get it over and done with. So I went full-time. So yeah, 5 years it was.
And so you sort of half work, half uni.
Oh,
and then
no, it was more like 1 day at uni and then we'd do Saturdays. So it was 1 day at uni, 5 days at work.
Right.
First 3 or 4. And then it was just done. And then I had that 3 years experience. I did 3 years at Multiplex, and then the Sydney Olympics were on. So then a lot of Multiplex guys went to work for SOCOG, the Olympic Committee, and we were basically there to procure materials. And so, the skills that builders had were utilised in the logistics and procurement section. So that was just a great, I was 21. It was just good fun, 21, 22. So I did that for a year, and then went and worked for a project management company because I kind of wanted to understand how clients, as a young fella, you're just getting instructions from someone in the building company. And I was the typical cadet. Like at Multiplex, I was working on Grace Brothers, which is now Myer in the city. At that point, I think it was a $500 million job, so a big job. There was about 40 engineers, 40 staff, engineers, project managers, quantity surveyors in our office. And there was one computer back in the day.
What?
I don't look that old, but there was literally, and so every file would get moved around. Like if there was a detail change, it was in a manila folder, and it would just go desk to desk to desk to desk, and then everyone would have to put their signature on it. So that happened every day, and like drawings came in big rolls. There was no email of drawings, and so then they'd have to get prints. So if there was 5 in a set, and there was 20 subbies that had to go to, they'd have to get printed. That 5 would have to get printed 20 times and then stuck in the pigeonholes for each subby.
Wow.
So
how old are you?
I know, I'm not that old. 46. I know, it's ridiculous.
It seems like a long, long time ago.
And then, but I was doing, you start off doing the mundane fridge fillings and all that stuff. And then, slowly got responsibility. But anyway, when I left Multiplex and SOCOG, I wanted to understand client instructions and, be in that conversation, not just sitting there getting the instruction and why are we knocking this out? Why are we doing this? Why are we changing this? So then I worked for a project management company for 3 years, and we worked on 3 main projects. We worked on the Reserve Bank refurb in Sydney, which was cool. Built a Bunnings out at Bankstown Airport. Managed a Bunnings for Bankstown Airport. So I was essentially within the Bankstown Airport frame for a while, which was interesting. And then one other car park. And then sort of after 3 years of that, I decided, I want to be a builder. And so I didn't want to stay client-side project management. I wanted to go back to building and ultimately have my own business. And I did, then I did 2 years with a builder, which is how I met Joe. He was, as I said, he was the project manager. I was a site engineer, and we had to deliver 150 apartments in Sydney, but in an old sandstone church, which had a whole lot of limitations. So we built on top of it, and then we dug this car stacker that went 12 stories under it, whilst the church wasn't occupied. It is now, but we had to keep all this sandstone and then go 12 stories under.
Wow.
And 122 cars. It's like a little, it's a I mean, I think it breaks down all the time, but German car stacker that drops all these cars into a pit, stores them, and then when you want it out, you press the button and it pulls them out.
Right, like a vending machine.
Correct. It's exactly what it is, but for cars.
Pretty cool. So you worked on pretty large and complicated projects. Construction at that level. And doing what you're doing now is almost like chalk and cheese. Like it's almost like a completely different ball game. So if you had to sort of look at what you learned then, how have you been able to take some of that into your work now? I
think there's and so when I first started my business, I had a really close mate that I'd grown up with, and I sort of knew, like you say, the bigger end of town, the project management, the client relationship, the paperwork, the documentation. So I'd say things like setting up like just the computer system and how to file things and the right procedures to ask a question and an RFI request. And all of that, was I understood from being in a larger company, larger organization. I think the problem with a cottage building industry or resi is, it's often most of the guys that are running these things are carpenters that have done apprenticeships and whatever. And so that I was lacking all of that. So, between myself and my business partner, he went and did a carpentry apprenticeship. So we sort of merged those two skills, and that just put us in a really good stead. So I could, do the tenders and all of that. And we never started off. We started off doing anything. We built bulky goods showrooms for BCFs, and so we bid that sort of end of town. But we also did resi, and I think the experience with some of these big concrete things actually helps you down. Sometimes you can go and look at a house and you might have to hold up a whole lot of. You might have to underpin it. You might have to hold up this, or there might be some details that are tricky and. They say, oh, every other builder came through and just went, oh my God. And I was like, yeah, okay, it's difficult, but we were in the city digging next to a railway tunnel 3 meters away and had vibration monitoring, and, we're pouring beams that had 400 cubics in a day, so that experience just helps me look at these other things and go, well, okay, I've seen much bigger things. So therefore it's engineering, but it's not as difficult. Or if you've just been putting up timber frame houses, of course that's going to be like, oh my God, what am I doing? So, the two, eventually then I learned more of the residential side, if you like, and then, but I'm not a chippy by trade. I've been to uni, but I just like, I just like the pulling it all together, like the sequencing, the getting the right trades, the getting the right details. I love pulling it all together, but I say to people, and I say this quite often, some guys just love, if you give a guy a block of timber, he'll carve that table. Or some guys are just carpenters, that's them. They just want to get this stuff perfect, or fit a door lock in a door or a jamb, or they could spend 6 hours, 10 hours, 20 hours, 40 hours just getting these things perfect. Whereas I don't have the patience for that. I'm more of a, if you gave me a pile of Lego and tipped it upside down over there in the corner and said, put it together, I love that sort of challenge of going, right, I don't want to make the Lego blocks, but I want to put the Lego blocks together, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you sort of like the big picture.
Yeah. And so, if I'm on site, I often do a weekend or a Saturday, I'll clean, because while I'm cleaning, I'm looking at that and that and that and that and that, and going, making this sort of mental list, going, right, Tyler needs to do that, they need to do that, that's not good enough. And so, whereas if I'm just in the corner concentrating on putting a bit of skirting on or whatever, I'm kind of not getting around to all the aspects.
It makes sense. It's more big picture. You can see the forest from the trees.
Correct.
And that's important too, because you need both, right? I think it's okay. So that's amazing. So when you so if you have like a complicated retaining wall on a residential project, for you it's just going to be a piece of piss. You're just going to be like, okay, I've seen way more than that.
Yep.
So that's really cool. You're talking about the professional side. I mean, I think that's so beneficial. Like you say, it's interesting you're calling it the cottage industry, because it's almost that. It's almost like guys are just on the tools, and then they sort of just work their way up, and then before you know it, they're running a company, but they've sort of come from the tools, where I think there's definitely benefit for you knowing that professional side, the client facing side. Like you say RFI, a lot of builders can listen to this, they don't even know what an RFI is, right?
Yep.
And so having that professional side is definitely going to set you apart straight away from the competition. And then how did you meet your business partner? So so
we literally, I think we were in year 3 at the local primary school.
Oh, right.
So we just we were the guys that we would just make things. We would make boats before we were allowed to take the boat out ourselves. We'd make boats. We'd make Lego cars. We'd make this. We'd ride our bikes around and pick up anything in the cleanups that you could. We'd pick up old speakers and wire them together.
Right.
And we were always doing that stuff. And then obviously we got older, and then we'd make boats and be able to sit in them and put outboards, all that stuff. And then, so then it was just, he did his own thing for probably 5 or 6 or 7 years after school. I did my thing, and then we sort of came together when we started the business. And then we started in 2006, and then by 2012 I took it over. And look, Pete might listen to this, but what happened was this is another thing when you work for yourself. You can't. There's no one the person setting the standards for you is yourself, or you're not getting work because the clients, your client won't tell you doing a shit job. The client's going to say, oh, well, when there's a referral, oh, don't use him. He was lazy. He was untidy. He was this or he's that. So you never really get marked, but you ultimately got to set your own standards and your own goals, right? And it's up to you how far you want to push, or how much or how high you want to make those hurdles or those standards. And so I just felt that in the end, I'd kind of, learned, and we were progressing the company in certain areas. And then he was just doing, I was struggling to get him to do the basics. And as a 50% owner in a business, I was like, well, I can just pay a guy to do that. And so, ultimately I made that decision, which was like, well, if you're not going to come with me and you're not going to better yourself and you're not going to develop and you're just going to sit there at the level you've reached, then ultimately, we're not aligned.
It's partnerships are extremely difficult in general when it comes to the construction industry, because it's such a complicated beast. When if you're not 100% in alignment and almost have complementary skill sets, it's very difficult to kind of keep that thing going.
Yeah.
I was in a partnership as well in a construction business.
Yep.
With a friend of mine, still a good friend of mine. We kind of went our separate ways for different reasons, but it's you have to really, you almost need to be like 99 out of 100% in alignment. Otherwise, you're constantly going to be going against each other. So
you got to have goal. Like, as I said, like it's just the basic stuff. Like, we started sending these site diaries early. We got onto this app early. Like, I think we got on this guy that his name was David Campbell. I think his name was David Campbell. Anyway, he developed this tradies app in Sydney, like one of those first apps, and we got onto that, and I'd sell it to clients to say, every day you'll get a diary. And this was like 2008, 2009.
Right.
And, I'd sell that. But then, so the guys running the other jobs could do their diary every day. And it's beneficial if you're in an office, like I mightn't get every job every day, but I can see something's been delivered. I can see who was on site. I can see what the weather was. It might trigger an extension of time, but it's a document, right? And every client's on email, they're all pretty much professional. They go, oh, look, there's the builder's report from the day. They laid the tiles. They did this. That's great. And, they just wouldn't come through daily. They'd be, a week would go past and like, where's your diary? And, so ultimately I was like, well, we just have to, anyway, look, so that was that. And then that was the same time that I started modifying. We talk about partnerships, but my wife and my wife works in the, Jen works in the, she sort of manages the upfront design team in the modified business these days. And so, talk about partnerships like that, that's a bloody good partnership. So,
yeah. You kind of stuck with that one.
Yeah. Well, yeah, but we honestly, she's super commercial, and, we don't really cross at all. Like, it's not like she does her things, I do my things, but when it works so well. It's some people are like, how can you work together? It's like, you know what? How could I not? It just makes the things that I hate doing, like legals and stuff, then she excels at, and, vice versa. So it works really well. So.
Oh, that's good. Okay. So talk to me then about, we're going to talk a bit about your company, Modify. So you've got obviously a construction business under a different name that was more to do with doing tenders.
Mm-hmm.
And then talk to me through your sort of thinking process of why you started Modify and what was needed in the market. Do you feel that Modify, the problems that Modify kind of solve now?
Okay. Yeah, look, this was born. So I started my own business in 2006, which is Profile Property Group is the trading name. And we were a builder. We would tender, we would, take clients out. We would, traditional wait for a tender to come through, and you'd do your thing, and you'd tender it and you'd win it, and you'd execute the job. And I guess in the bigger commercial world, that works. That's the process. And then, but when you got into the sort of smaller resi end of town, that process the tender and the document, the tender's only as good as the documentation that is presented to you to price. And so I had numerous friends and colleagues and, referrals saying, look, we want to do this or we want to do this. And I'd say, well, look, we're not architects, but what I'd suggest is go and get an architect or a draftsman person to design it, do the approvals, and then come back and see me when you've got that. And then often they would do that and then they'd come back and then they might have discussed budget with that particular architect draftsperson, but ultimately it's very hard to design or budget. So we would come back, we would price it, and we'd say that's 800,000. They go, and people would either fall off their chair and think, well, no, I told the architect or the draftsperson it was only I only had 400. Now, I'm not. It's very hard to design or budget, but what I thought was lacking was someone in the middle or someone to bring it from the initial all the way to completion that could give early feedback. It's basically early contractor engagement, and big companies do it, and it's slowly becoming more the norm where even if it's not a design and construct business like ours, where an architectural firm will say, hey, we want to the client, we should engage builder X to at least look at the drawings before we submit the DA, at least look at some engineering, because builders have a different, and there's always a bit of back and forth with the engineer and, hey, can we do it this way? Oh yeah, we can do it that way. No, and so if you get the builder input at the start, you ultimately get a lot better outcome at the other end. And so then I was like, well, why don't we formalize this process? So we were trying to find a brand name that was more consumer friendly, if you like. And so that's where Modify came from. And then managed to get modify.com.au off some guy that used to modify cars.
Oh, beautiful.
He was like a car modifying guy. And so then we started, and that's sort of 10 years and 150 jobs later. It's so rewarding getting the brief at the front end where someone says, look, I've just run out of room, or that corner smells, I don't know what's wrong with it, but it's damp and it's wet. And so, that might be the catalyst of like, well, you know what, we're here, we're going to put 2 more rooms on, we're going to do the bathrooms, I want to do the garage, I want to do the pool, I want to do the landscape. And so often these things start with some smallish problem, but in the back of their mind, they're going, well, you know what, we've got to do it anyway, so let's just rip the Band-Aid off and do it. And then what we do is really early, so we fix our architectural fees. There's a lot of architects that are on a percentage of costs, which again, I know that's the model, but it's a bit crazy. So we fix our architectural fees because when we can't go from designing 3 bedrooms to 16 bedrooms, but the brief is typically the brief. And, Sydney's mainly renos. Like we talked about New Zealand market and Queenstown earlier, but 99% of what we're doing in Sydney is renovations because the housing stock exists, and you know what you're working with and whatnot. So we fix our fees, and the whole way along, even after the first sketch plans are done, we will do some preliminary costing. So at least in you haven't done structural documentation, you haven't done all these layers and spent all this money with consultants. We will literally price it off our architect's first run, and that gives the client some confidence that, hey, it is an 800 grand job, or it's a 400 grand job, or it's within budget, or, hey, you know what, that's good. Can we explore this as well because it's under budget or whatever?
Yeah,
and
there's some certainty there.
100%. And then we've got certainty, and because we don't want to, there's so many disaster stories out there where they've done all the documentation, spent a year in council, and then it goes to 3 builders, and then it comes back at 3 million, and their budget's 1.8, and then everyone's unhappy. There's no way back from that, in my opinion. Or typically clients, we took over one, typically clients will just change tack, change architect, change everything. And it's like you're literally throwing that original documentation in the bin and starting again. And we did one of those in Bronte, and that originally was going to be knocked down, and when we got involved, they'd said, no, we've given up on that. It's too expensive. We want to renovate. And, so it's from start to finish all the way through, and you're getting builder input on everything, on services, on like even this sustainability stuff now, insulation, passive house, there's so many, as you said, it's so complex. So, there's so many options, materials that work well together, materials that don't work well together, like all of that is what you need the creatives to come up with what you're doing, but you also need the builder input to make sure it's going to gel and go together at the other end.
I think that's great. I think that accountability side is huge. You have so many chefs in the kitchen with a traditional way of doing things that no one ultimately takes responsibility of the project, even though the builder's responsible for 95% of the budget.
Yep.
They don't. They can't take ownership because the architect's kind of in control.
Yep.
And the architect don't really take. And the architect never has to give the bad news, because if the architect draws it all up, it's you, the builder, that comes and gives them the bad news, and you're the bad guy.
Yep.
So I think the design and construct model, and the model you guys have, I think is a really good one, because the clients don't build every year, right? They don't know. So they need someone to hold their hand. They need that certainty, someone that is fully accountable to them and the project and really understand their needs. So yeah, I think it's really a really good one. Yeah. So in terms of your people always want to know the structure. So how sort of let's dive into modifier. So how big is your team? How many projects do you guys generally do at a time?
It's generally 5 or 6 at any one time. And then we have so obviously I'm the director owner across all of it, but essentially the management of the sites, we've got a construction manager that manages the modifier sites. We've got an in-house PM that sits under him as well. And so, people think that, that's a lot of management, but, there's a lot of moving parts, there's a lot of procurement, there's a lot of, there's a lot of things happening. And then each site's got dedicated foreman, leading hand, labourer, apprentice, probably employ 5, 6, 7 apprentices. We do our own rubbish too, like rubbish in Sydney, it's tight. The old just get a bin out the front does, that either people fill it up on the weekends, or there's the parking spots not there, or so we just run. We've got 4 trucks. We run our own trucks so that, because ultimately the truck's flexible, you can move it, you can do this. We also sort too, so we're incentivized then to take bricks as clean bricks, and so you're sorting your rubbish, because rubbish in Sydney and the cost is astronomical. But and so that's basically the structure. So you've got those guys managing. Ultimately, I sit over the top of it, and then all the guys running their own jobs.
And how many? How big is your team overall? What's the head count?
So it's about 30, including the design team and the profile business that still. So we've probably got 3 profile jobs on as well. So you've probably got 7 or 8 jobs at any one time. So the profile jobs are, we do our own industrial development. So they build those, which are just, factory boxes. So profile builds those, and we really only tender now for an architect called Luigi Rosselli in Sydney that does this, amazing work. And he just administers contracts, like he's very fair. And so, like, having done this for this long, if there's a problem, if I know I'm in trouble, I know. And if the client, he doesn't feel like because the client's paying him that he's got to side with the client. He's just he's very fair. And as I said, there's no grey, like in 20 years, and especially, as you said, like the builder's got to give the bad news, and so the architect doesn't seem to. They're paid by the client, but ultimately, if they're administering a contract, there's sort of this conflict of, well, hang on, the client's paying me, so do I go to, or if something's been missed in documentation, So anyway, so we really try. I really like working with Luigi because he pushes a boundary on design. We're doing rammed earth walls, we're doing. Everything's curved, so they're just really cool to build, and the team that delivers those. So on the profile side, I have another construction manager and another PM, so it's essentially 2 teams. And the guys on that side, they love the challenge. I love the challenge. It's and they're bigger projects. So
yeah. Why say no if it works and you like working with the architect? It is a bit of a dance. It's a little bit of politics as well. Things go wrong. the architect, maybe they copy paste it. Not saying they do it, but a lot of architects, the younger guys in the office may copy paste some things, and it's all wrong.
Engineers are getting worse at that.
Really?
Engineers are just.
And then who do you throw? You can't throw them under the bus in front of the client. There's a lot of sort of politics and dance.
There is a bit of that, yeah. But look, if you've got a good relationship with the architect, then you can talk through that. And as I said, I feel like with Luigi, that works really well. There's a respect both ways, and I think that's where you need to get to.
Yeah, if it works, works. That's awesome.
Mm.
So in terms of your team, so you've got a big team. How do you attract good talent, and how do you sort of cultivate good culture in your team?
It's hard. Like we've got my oldest, one of my foremen's been working with me since 2008, 2009. So like we've got numerous guys that have come back. Our construction manager did an apprenticeship, then went out to contract, because they want to earn a few more dollars, and then obviously that's hard contracting because you got to try and get the continuous hours and whatever. And so he's come back with another foreman that did a similar thing, apprenticeship, went out, came back. So, we got to, we're people, I think it's a good place to work. I mean, construction's hard. It's still, every day is a hard day, right? You're still on the tools, you're in the elements, you're moving materials, it's dusty, it's noisy, it's, so it's not, it's not for the faint-hearted. And then we try and have 5 or 6 apprentices at any one time coming through. And, ultimately some are going to make it, some are not going to make it. And, we've come out with our own in-house training manual that's basically a back-to-back of the TAFE here. But so if they're learning, fix out, or they're learning, mortise locks or whatever they're learning at TAFE, then that module we've tried to put in our own training plan. So then the site foreman, if they're on that job, they are, ultimately when we get to that stage, we want to say, well, right, okay, you've learned this at TAFE, but here it is in the real world, because theory's great, and I know they do some prac at TAFE, but it's when you're working with a real lock and a real door that's going to go in a real house for Mr. and Mrs. Smith, that's different to the TAFE one they're just going to throw in the bin, right? So, So we try and back-to-back that so it follows their course and their development. Cultures, staff and culture. I mean, you need them. You can't. The business is nothing without them. But I think at the moment we went through COVID and it was hard to find people. And then I thought it came back a bit. I thought the labour market, some more of the Irish guys came back in, the English guys came back in, maybe some Kiwis. But it's at the moment I'm looking, and I think it's just as tight. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's always. I mean, people management, right, is always kind of one of the more complicated things. A lot of soft skills required around that, keeping everyone happy.
Yep.
Keeping the culture moving. So, it's kind of just always interesting to know how different people do it and what their approach is.
Look, I'm probably a bit of a sledgehammer sometimes. I could probably soften up, but it's hard because you're ultimately on deadlines. Look, builders are under a lot of pressure. If you read the news, there's more builders gone broke this year than I think any other year in history, right? So, you've got to balance the commercial reality of the business against, the woman, fluffy with the staff and giving them time and then entertaining and all of that. It's a juggle. It's a real juggle.
Yeah. Ultimately, it's, having a job is really good too. So you got to keep it afloat, right?
Well, that's exactly right. And so, you can't be afraid to make some hard decisions, or you just got to say, look, we're not doing this for this, the it's hard. The budgets and cost management is really hard.
So with Modify, how do you guys get your work? Like you guys seem to be working on some amazing projects. How do you guys get the work coming in? Do you do any sort of marketing, clever marketing?
Probably 3 years ago, we went to a full-time, well, when I say full-time, like 3 days a week, full-time marketing person. And they work across the two businesses. And so it's Instagram. We're in Paddington in Sydney, and there's a magazine there called The Local Paddo, which we will advertise in that. it's a lot of referrals, word of mouth. I mean, there's even builders out there that, you know, back in the day just had they're in the yellow pages, and you know, it's you know, word of mouth hugely powerful in the construction game. But yeah, it's Facebook, Instagram, bit of print.
Have you guys seen like a difference, you know, since you've hired your marketing person? I'm sure she'll be listening to this, so you probably say be careful with your answer. But have you guys seen because a lot of people are wondering out there, like, you know, people have just relied on word of mouth. They go, you know, it's almost like a bit of builders are generally proud if they go, oh, mate, we don't do any marketing. We don't even put a sign up front. I don't want anyone to know I exist. Everything just comes through referrals, and they're almost proud of it. But, you know, as the market's starting to shift, you do need to have a presence. What sort of difference did you see hiring a marketing person?
I think we've definitely, I think people just get confidence. Like the other thing we did is our office is a shop front. And so when we set our office up, a lot of builders don't have a face, you know, like, you know, even banks these days are shutting the branches and they're on the internet, right? So we went, well, hang on, and so we were like, well, no, we want a shop front, we want a face. So, you know, all clients are in there for meetings, like, so it's an office, but as a builder and designer, you know, it's a reasonably unique offering. We're not on level 3 of a commercial building, right? We're a friendly shop front. So I think, you know, that's hugely powerful. We definitely get more referrals. You know, I think we've cut, you know, the rates are up at the moment. I think, you know, Sydney's just an expensive place to live, right? If you've got to buy a house and you've got 2 or 3 kids and you need to, you know, like, you know, it's hard enough just to buy the house and, you know, get through life, let alone spend the, you know, the 1 or the 2 or the 3 on the reno, right? So, you know, it's, you know, I think at the moment the market's okay. I think, you know, the rates come off a bit, it might even go, you know, there'll be more inquiry. But, you know, look, we get steady inquiry, and, you know, I guess it also, the shop front gives people, and just the marketing just gives people confidence that, hey, look, that's what, you know, we've turned that out, we've done that with, you know, and so people go, look at this portfolio. It's a portfolio online as much as it is a tool to market, you know, to win work. It's just, if there is a referral, they look it up and go, oh, okay, these guys are good.
And so do you guys, is it purely design construct, or do you guys have pre-done some plans for that people can look at?
I thought about that. That was one of my initial thoughts, is like, I'm going to have the board over there that's like the tiles and the taps, but it doesn't, every client's unique, every job is unique. As I said, they're 99% renos.
Yeah, so you're not gonna. Yeah, it's all. And you don't want to compete. You don't want to compete with like the volume builders, because then immediately you get put in that bracket, and now you're just a more expensive version of that. You know.
But even those guys can't operate like as I said, east. You know, on the North Shore, a bit of inner west. Like, you know, if you went from Sydney and you went 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 15 k's out, you're really struggling. There's some areas where you could knock down the old fibro that was built in the 30s or 40s, and a Masterton or a, you know, one of those guys could turn up and do the knockdown rebuild new project home. But any of these terraces, semi-detached, you can't knock that down because you're attached to the neighbour, right? So you've got no option but to renovate it. So they can't really even compete in the market.
Yeah, so that makes sense.
Yeah, so it's all renos. That was an idea, but it never. You can't do it. Every client's unique, every project's unique, and that's what's cool about doing what we do. It's if you did the same thing day in day out, well,
you get a bit boring.
Correct.
So I mean, I don't know exactly where you guys are located, but I know even in New Zealand or in Auckland as well, where I'm from, there's a lot of like. Obviously, there's builders that end up specialising almost in certain suburbs, you know, because they sort of, the neighbour asks, can you do ours next? And in the end, by osmosis, they sort of just in that area. And sometimes there's like little side streets with old retail shop fronts that are actually, because I don't know about sort of Sydney, the fringe here, or whether retail, you know, the vacancies are going up or not. But I know in Auckland and there's some other cities where the vacancies are
Mhm.
going up. So then actually finding a little shop front on a side street or something is not the worst thing, because
No,
you might need an office anyway.
correct.
So rather than paying the rent on an office somewhere, that people can't see where you are, maybe you hire like a little shop
Correct.
front in sort of an old established little neighborhood or something, and then people have somewhere to go, and it looks a bit more warm and fuzzy for the
Yeah, and it
married couple
feels-
that's coming in.
Yeah, and it feels a bit more genuine, right? If you're doing
Yeah.
housing and you're in an old house / shop, it's a bit more genuine than the
Yeah.
office that's got ceiling tiles and, big open plan layout. And it just feels a bit more inviting. And, if it's in the neighborhood, people will walk there, it's, or like you say, they're driving past or whatnot. Yeah, look, we're in Paddington in Sydney, so we get a lot of Paddington jobs, and, we might have, like, people just, they see the trucks every day, they see the signs every day. We've got one in Mossman at the moment. We're looking at a couple in the inner west. So we're not, when we do our advertising, or, you can set the radius on Instagram or Facebook, we're going 15, 20 Ks, but we do get tagged with that. Oh, they're based in Paddo. They only do Paddo, but, we just done one in Bondi and whatever. So yeah, it's hard. How do you overcome that? I don't know. That's a challenge that I'm always trying to think, like, because Mossman's huge suburb just on the other side of the harbour here, a lot of semi-detached, original fabric houses. I think it's the largest. It's quite a large suburb. I think if you look at the stats, it's like the largest suburb of income in the country, because it's so big, and it's
Right.
also quite wealthy. And so, like, I would, I always think, if we had a 30 little satellite office there, would we get the same cut through as we do in Paddington? And I think the answer is yes, but maybe that's the next step, a little satellite office over there.
Is that one of those things we always kind of, because I own an agency that works with builders, like custom builders as well. And what we always say to them is, what you show, from a marketing perspective, whatever you show, you get more of. So if you really want to zone in on certain suburbs and you've already done a job there, putting a little bit of extra effort into creating maybe a case study piece of video content, and then showing that, whatever you show,
Yeah, you're right.
whether it's the product or the location, you're going to get more of that,
Yep.
So,
Yep.
So now, okay, and that's very cool. Okay, so your sales process, a lot of builders are very interested in this, right? Because they, optimizing their business and figuring out how they can get more clients, and once they come through, how they can improve the conversion of the prospect into a client. So your sales process. So when people come to you guys, do you charge for a quote? Do you make them sign a preliminary agreement? How does your sales process work? So you can kind of.
So, you've got the two businesses, but with the modified design and construct, we will go out, see them, do the first consult. Obviously there's no cost involved in that, because, you got to go and have a look at it in the first place. And then our first step from there is because we're the design business as well, our first step from there is is an architectural fee proposal. So that outlines fees from the very start all the way through to all the documentation you need to commence building, including, so we'll charge for a cost estimate in that process. However, if they then, and we don't say to people, you've got to build with us, but most people understand that once they're in that process, it's enjoyable, that we're giving them honest feedback, we're giving them, honest trades. A lot of people struggle. They think, oh, we don't want to tell the builder the budget in the first place. It's like, well, I reckon that's almost the opposite, because if you want to get to a number, you've got to sort of put that on the table. So we design it all, and then, as I said, people are happy to, we don't say you're locked in to build with us, but as I said, 95% of people will just go, great, when are we starting? Great, when are we starting? And we just, they've got so much confidence in that process that, and we nail everything down. Like, I think the biggest mistake is people starting, if you're a traditional builder, you get a set of drawings from a drafty, an architect, a client, you need everything documented, because, like, people go, oh, I'll choose a taps later. You can't choose a tap later. Like, some of these things have got 12-week lead times with finishes. They don't stock, sure, if it's a standard chrome tap, okay, fine. But even that, like, everyone will forget about it. Everyone's busy. and then, the week will come and the plumber's like, where is it? And then it's a panic. And it's like, we won't start until everything's laid out in a schedule, and including joinery. I think the other big mistake that people make is they leave the joinery documentation once, builder's on site, let him do his thing, demo, yada, yada, and then they start this joinery process. But, I mean, it's the same it's the same in New Zealand. I know that it's like these joiners they're working on jobs for the next 6 months. They're already booked out for 6 months at least. If you've got a couple $100,000 joinery package, they're talking 7 months, 8 months away. And if you're not locking them in when you start the build, there's no way you're going to get them on the time. And so if you don't have these critical things like taps, tiles, and it's become worse with procurement in COVID. Everyone says, everything's taking longer. So and joinery, then you're destined to fail. Like the strongest advice is everything needs to be done, chosen, locked in on the day you start. And
I think that's great advice. I think sometimes builders, especially when the guys have come through the trades, they may not be as organized or forward thinking. But also what you're saying before as well, with the taps, is that sometimes builders are too nice. They think they're being nice to the client. And the client go, I don't really have time to choose the taps right now. And they go, okay, we'll just sort it later. They try to be so nice that they actually shoot themselves in the foot.
Yep.
By not pushing back a little bit. Like, no, we have to organize this, and this needs to, so no, I think that's really good. So in your business then, what numbers are the most important to you, whether it's financial, whether it's headcount or whatever? What are the numbers that you look at to make sure that everything's on track and everything's going as they should?
I think with trade, so, if you break a construction project into two parts in terms of numbers, you've got trades, and, every builder's highly reliant on trades. Like if you look, there's builders and I'd say we're more of a builder, and I'll explain that, which is that if we need to put props in, and we need to put beams in, and we need to underpin walls, and we need to dig footings, and we need to, even small suspended slabs, we'll do all that with our own in-house staff. So we won't, like if we've got a 20 square metre concrete slab that's suspended, we've got enough frames to do that. Because if you let that to a concrete guy, he'll say, he'll price and go, I've got 3 days to put all the formwork in, and then. Some of these jobs are not that simple. You might have to put the frames in and then go away and then come back for another day to do some edge boards, and then come back for another day. And then all of a sudden you're in a fight with the guy because he's allowed 3 days, but we really need him for 5 days because of this process. We might have to incorporate some lights, or, I don't know. And so I just found over the years it was easier to price those to do those things ourselves with our own labor, and then we could get them spot on. And it also takes the aggro. If you've given it, or a trade wants a clean run. Every trade wants a clean run. They're the same as the builder. They're driving to work. They're paying fuel. They're paying tolls. They want to get in and out too, right? Because the longer it takes them, the less money they make. They've all got their own financial pressures, right? But anyway, if you divide it, so I'd say, well, first of all, we're more of a builder's builder, which means if there's 20 trades on a job, we might do 3 or 4 ourselves, like a bit of concrete ourselves, a bit of reo fixing. We'll build our own pools because I've had nothing but bad experiences with pool builders. Sorry, pool guys. And then you look at it and you go, well, the biggest risk on all that is time. Like every day, if you've got and we fix our jobs are fixed, so we don't do any cost plus, because I just think no one wins. I find that people get too relaxed. Oh, it doesn't matter what it costs. But ultimately, every client's got a budget, and so. And they're getting super nervous, or they're even making decisions on what their gut feel is. If you're on cost plus, they don't know if it's going to end up. You can tell them as much as you want, but so anyway, we fix it. So then every client's got, and we fix the time too. So let's say I'm building your house, we'll go in, everything's selected, time. I'll say it's 45 weeks, and if it goes 47, I don't charge the client for 47. You get charged for 45. So that's my incentive to get out of there. And if I get out in 43, which is very rare, then okay, I've got 2 weeks up my sleeve. But that's a bonus, right? But typically, I reckon we're within 5% of that time frame. So I take the risk on all that. So then, in terms of numbers, the risk, I would say trades are fairly easy to manage because you can sit down with a tiler and say, right, we've got 25,000 to tile the job, and you can get 3 tiling prices, and you can manage those, and then once you've let that, you pass the risk down to the tiler. Air conditioning, plumbing, electrical, you're essentially going, right, there's 3/4 of the job or half the job handed out, and then that pushes the risk onto those guys. But then you've got the other half, which is time. Everything's time related. So you've got the foreman or site manager, the apprentice, the chippy. Maybe you bring two other chippies in to help with some cladding, some flooring. Materials, there's not a lot of risk in materials. If you've priced floor joists, okay, look, COVID was an exception, but houses don't have, especially renos, the material cost is not massive. It's there, but if it goes up 10-15%, you're not gonna fail, if you know what I mean. But then you've got the labor, right? So that's the killer. Like every day we burn something like $12,000 a day in labor, right? So every day, every morning I wake up, or every night you go to bed, you've just burnt 12 grand. The next day, 12 grand. Next day, 12 grand. And so I say to my guys, like, that's the petrol tank. Like, that's the range anxiety, like electric car, right? That's where you fail, in my opinion, because you can sign up your trades for your trades, but you can't. Your labor's so hard to manage. So you've got to be. I look at ours and I go, right, if it's a 6-month project, every month I've got 25 grand or whatever the number is, and we're getting every hour, and we're going, right, if we had 25 grand this month, what did we spend? And we might spend 22 some months, but other months we might spend 28. But then it balances out. So that's, to me, that petrol gauge that I talk about with my guys, and that's how I manage it. That's the biggest number.
That's great. Yeah, that's a great way of looking at it. So give me then some insights on how do you manage that? Is it about the site manager or foreman or whatever? Like, how do you kind of like, optimize that?
So, well, you work out what your daily, like, if you set it up with a site manager, a leading hand, and an apprentice, say, then you know that burn, what that is on a monthly burn, right? And so, as I said, like month 1 might be a bit less because you're doing some demo, we've got a demo contractor. So we've only really got a site manager there, maybe an apprentice 1 or 2 days if we're trying to do something. And then, so the first month you're generally under that. And then the next month, you should, so you sort of start off a bit lower, but then towards the end of the job, every builder will know that you always need a bit more labor. So you can look at it and go, well, okay, we've been under for 3 months, so we're 20 grand in front, but we definitely know to bring these 2 carpenters in to do this, and therefore, it's going to catch us back up. So you've just got to know what are those 3 guys or 2 guys or 4 guys, depending on the size of the job, what are they costing you? So if you do nothing for the month, are you still on budget? Like if you just say, right, you guys are going to that job for those 4 weeks, what's that going to cost? And if you know that that's, you can sleep easy at night knowing that that's that. And then, as I said, then you're trying to go, well, hang on, it's a bit quiet over there this week, let's push it over there. And then you try and optimize all the resources. And so you're ultimately, and ideally, it's like anything, you probably want to be a bit like I've been 20 years next year, same ABN, like, fixed every defect that's been thrown at me. Like it's a hard game, and all the mistakes that you're learning when you're young, you're now implementing into the new one. So you've got less, less issues, less defects, less warranty claims, all of that. But, it's all about managing that cost and that labor. But you want to be lean. Like if anything, it'd be nice to have 2 guys sitting on the bench, but, it's almost like playing rugby with 14 players. Like, it's like you're supposed to have 15 on the field, but if you've got 6, if you've got 16 on there, you're going to go broke. It's almost like everyone's got to run around at 14. It's like the bloke's been sent off,
Yeah.
And that's, you've just got to be that little bit leaner, in my opinion. And sure, so not every day, but most days everyone's like, oh, I know you wish you had one more bloke, but there's also a point with the clients when the guys on site have got to realise we've got to win the jobs. And so, you'd love to put an extra bloke in the job for the whole time, but, you've got to win the job. There's a commercial reality to that as well. So you've really got to balance that out. But those numbers, the cost of labour or the cost, and our guys are all on hourly rate too, or most of them, 90% of them. You know, they just want to get turned up and get paid, but you're ultimately taking the risk on that, right? So
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I 100% get that. You're talking about risk, and you're talking about learning from your mistakes. 20 years in the game, what's been your biggest, maybe it was a mistake of yours, maybe it wasn't, but what has been your biggest financial hit that you had to take on a project?
Yeah, I hit two big ones. It was about 700 on a job, 700 on a smash repairer.
What?
Yeah, and probably $500,000 on you learn. I mean, most people, you watch a lot of that. If you're watching that Instagram quotes and people that have been in business, they say you've got to fail to succeed. I don't necessarily think that's right, but you've certainly got to learn the mistakes of, you certainly got to learn mistakes and you know, fast. And so,
what impact did that have on you when you? Did you say $500,000?
Yeah, one was 700, one was 500. Yeah, and they were probably a year or two. They weren't far apart, so it's hard to recover.
What impact did that have on the business and on yourself?
Yeah, look, you somehow get through, and then you know, obviously you got to put money into the business and whatnot. And you know, I guess we were lucky early days. We made some money and we bought some property, and you know, we did some development, and you know, but it still hurts, right? And no one likes going backwards. And so it was just, and really, one of them was 21 townhouses that we did out west in some new development land, like you know, where Sydney's growth belt is, where we're competing with those project home guys. And it was a referral from someone who knew someone, and they were developers, and I thought, okay, this is all right. And so we you know, and if you ask me what was wrong, the documentation was no good. Like, we started these things and there was no sewer design. So we should have just said, sorry guys, we're not starting. So like, back to my point before, like, if it's not there at the start, it's not there at the start, like, just walk away. Like, and so these 21 townhouses had no sewer, and it was the developers. We were building for a developer, but the developer didn't have this stuff sorted. So then they're just, you know, so then, you know, we didn't know this at the time, but it's, what we did was went, righto, like, let's just go, like, chasing turnover is one thing, and that we'd probably chased a bit of turnover, and that, you know, ultimately failed and went the other way. We would have been better off doing none of that job. And, and we just said, right, no, we've just got to get hard and fast on the process. Like, so that, as I said, we now control our own documentation. So the lesson was, right, let's just control our own documentation. But in saying that, we can still work externally, which we do, but we know that documentation's at a level that's acceptable, as opposed to, well, is better than acceptable, but it's not going to bring us undone. And you just get harder and faster. You just get more confidence. You've been through your 30s or late 20s, 30s, where you would do anything to make a dollar. And I'm sure, you know, there's some young guys out there probably doing the same now, and they'll look back and I look back and go, why did I do that? But I know why, because I was hungry. I was trying to, you know, you're happy to do anything because you're trying to make a dollar. But you just get firmer on your process, and you say, no, I'm not doing it unless I know how to do this. You're asking me my professional opinion, like going to see a surgeon going, mate, do you want to do it this way or that way? Or you say, listen, he's going to do your knee this way. And you say, no, why don't you do it? Can we do it this way? And the surgeon goes, no, like, you're asking for my opinion. My opinion's my opinion. You don't want to do it my way, you go and see someone else. And so, you know, you've just got to hold your line.
Yeah. See yourself as a professional, see yourself as a consultant. Correct. You are a doctor. They're coming to you. Correct. They don't know.
Correct.
And so act like it. It's sort of
100%.
Yeah.
100%. And not only that, the warranty is longer than any surgeon's warranty. It's, you know, it's 6, possibly going longer. Like, you're talking about, you know, it's the warranty. And as I said, you know, they're all one-offs too. They're all one-off. You know, if I come back to cars, this is the best analogy. Is like, if you're building a new car, you get to test it for millions of kilometers. You have 30 test mules that you throw away at the end of the day. You know, all those learnings go into the production model. These houses are one-offs, but the learnings are the learnings that we've learned over the 20 years of, you know, 30 years in the industry. to clients out there, you got to find someone that's, that understands that, knows these details, that, can pull all that experience together and put it into your house or whatever you're building.
Yeah, for sure. Did you have a mentor at any point in time? Do you have a mentor? Do you have someone that you sort of like, or other builders that you catch up with regularly, or?
I'd like to catch up more with Joe, but he's a hard man to nail down. Yes and no. I've got some guys outside the industry that I look up to, and one of them's in finance, and whilst it's a completely separate business, it's a bigger beast, and and I've always had a pretty broad network in terms of people outside, and that's where a lot of our work's generated from too. Is the broader your network, the broader your social network. This even all the way back to schooling helps. And I've got probably 7 or 8 really close mates that we went to school with, and they're all self-employed. Like one's an accountant, one works in food, another one's a builder. He actually worked for me, but now he does his own thing. Another accountant, another guy on property. So we're all basically self-employed. There must have been something in the water or something that I think honestly our parents, it all came from that sort of baby boomer generation that just taught us to work hard, and so they're all got their own. We talk a lot actually.
Yeah, that's really good, because no man's an island, and especially not in business. You can't just sort of isolate yourself too much, because you learn from others, and new work will come from it. This one, before I let you go, because we're actually coming up to an hour now, so it's going pretty fast, and it's an interesting conversation. What is, you've done it 20 years now. You've obviously changed your perspective over time, as you learn new things and you look at life in a different way. What is success to you now?
I think success is, I think getting the business to run, like, everyone's, again, there's, the quotes and whatnot out there, but I want the success is the business running without me being involved in every detail. And it's getting the business to run, as I said, without, with a little bit less input from myself. And that's hard, because you've got to teach, these younger guys and girls what to look out for and where the pitfalls are and whatnot. So I think that's one that I would mark myself on. And I mean, ultimately, success is finishing jobs, shaking hands with the client, having a beer with them, and you're not, because and I think that's been, because there's always a little bit at the other end, there's always this, or there's a bit of that, or, and so the better you manage clients' expectations on the way through and tell them that this might happen, or tell them that might happen, or you got to come back in a year because that wall joint, that's definitely going to, or the timber was a bit wet when it went in, and there's always a bit of movement in these things. So it's about managing that, saying, look, that's normal, but and shaking hands at the end. I honestly can't tell you, that's the number one. Like walking out, shaking hands. They say, so how good was that? That's been, like, I couldn't have asked for more. I think that's success, and obviously making money, but happy client is probably the number one. Driver.
Sure. I think that's a great way for us to, a great place for us to finish. I have some rapid fire questions for you before I let you go.
Yeah.
So you can just sort of pass, or yes or no. You can lie as well, as I always say to them. To the guests, you can lie as well if you want. But yeah, okay, cool. So if you wouldn't mind, I'll run you through some rapid fire questions, and then I'll let you go, Stephen. So remind me, how big is your team?
30.
What is your crew mix? So qualified versus unqualified.
Well, apart from the apprentices who are in the process of being qualified, everyone else would be qualified, from designers, interior designers, architects. We've got registered architects.
Cool. And how many apprentices do you have at the moment?
5.
Cool. How many projects did you complete last year?
Probably 5 or 6 or 7, typically.
Yeah. What's your turnover range? Under 1 mil, 1 to 5, 5 to 10, 10 to 15, 15, 20, 20 plus.
15 to 20.
Cool. What's the lowest gross profit margin building companies should at least be aiming for?
I think you've got to be at 15% gross.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy to lose. It just disappears.
Yeah.
Like even stuff like, I was looking at uniforms this week. It's like, oh my God, like, yep.
Yeah. Free quote or paid quote?
Free quote.
QS or price yourself?
Price yourself.
Project management software or spreadsheets?
That's a good question. How long have you got? It's a combination. It's my short answer is cheap software, because I think like Procore are going to hate me, but like the expensive software for the young guys, like you're trying to start out, you don't want to pay 20, 30, you don't want to pay 10 grand a license for construction software. So it's definitely software, but find something that gives you 70%, 80%, and then bolt a spreadsheet on the side.
Yeah. Never going to be perfect.
No, it never is.
Yeah.
No.
And keep it within your, where you're at.
It's just overhead at the end of the day. So,
yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Is it worth it or not? Right. Fixed price contract or cost plus?
Fixed price.
Texting or talking on the phone?
Talking. Oh, yeah. I can't. Yeah. Young people listen to that.
Would you rather have a beer with an architect, a subby, or a council member?
There's no right answer here. The architect and the subby, because probably the two of them probably don't ever get to chat. And so I think there's actually some really cool conversation if, the architect does his thing, we're in the middle, and then the subby's there. And ultimately, like if I reference my Tyler, he would love a beer with the architect. So
Yeah.
I think those
Everyone.
two, not the council.
Not the council member. Jock or hippie?
Jock.
The rowing side. Wine or whiskey?
Wine.
These days, building business owners are, especially the younger guys, too impatient, forward thinkers, or hard workers.
I don't know. That's a hard one. All of the above. Probably. If I think about me, probably all of the above.
Yeah. Are you too mean or too nice to your staff?
Mean.
They'll be watching this. They'll be commenting below. What has inspired you the most in life or in business? Or who has inspired you the most in life or in business?
Probably some of the established developers that are out there. Like if, there's nothing better than, pulling a site. Like I know I said we do a bit of development, but, just having the grunt and the balls, I guess, to buy land, do your thing on it, then and do it yourself. Like, and as I said, we build them as well, so we're like a full on with a whole lot. The guys that have succeeded, at that, names off the top of my head, I don't know, but I mean Tim Gurner's a good example at the moment. He's doing massive things in development. Started off as a gym guy, and and not very old. Guys that have had a crack and succeeded in the property game.
Yeah, for sure. Last question before I let you go: Land Rover or Land Cruiser?
Land Rover. Is that a fair income? Is that on your?
No, it's not. I just added that.
Yeah.
Did you have fun?
That was great, actually.
Yeah. Thanks so
really
much
good.
for coming on. I think it was a lot of intricacies, a lot of practical stuff out there that I think a lot of guys would have found quite interesting
Yep.
And valuable. So I appreciate you coming on. Thanks, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.